Welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Paperback Flicks. I'm Ruth Craddock, and I'm here with
Ray
Ray
Davidson.
Davidson. Yep,
Yep.
doing our thing and everything. Um, and we're here to talk about Firestarter, which is written by Stephen King. And we're talking also about the two movie adaptations that are out there. So yeah, book. What are your thoughts about the book?
So, so this is my first Stephen King that I had ever read. And I was expecting like horror. Like my mother-in-law loves Stephen King and she's read just about everything that he's ever written that I know of. And like she talks about how like she'll be like reading a book and she won't notice that hours have gone by and it'll be super late at night. And then like if she hears a car outside or something, she's like, and she's and so I was expecting that, and this is not that. Like it has like thriller aspects and it has kind of the psychedelic like the mind trick type
Mm-hmm.
creepiness, but it's not the like you're scared to open the door kind of feeling.
No, yeah, yeah, I agree. So it's more of his on his thriller side of things than his horror. And I've only really read so many books of Stephen King's. I've read The Stand. I've read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I've read this, and I swear there's another book I read, but I can't remember right now. Um, but um, so yeah, like from what I've read of him, he's fairly versatile. He can write a bunch of different things. Um, well, was there anything that you noticed about his writing style that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, it was kind of weird to me. Like, he tells a good story. And so I'll get very into the story. And I'm not like a super prude where I'm like, there was a dirty word in there. But I, I felt like there was a lot of just gratuitous, like at one point, like someone says something like, what in the Christ? Or something that I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like, like, do you know what I mean? Or the effing F bombs that were like throughout portions of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like it almost got in the way of his story. Like I'm like, the story is great. I am in it. And you actually pull me out a little bit when it gets in the way of the writing, I felt like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like so excessive swearing can sort of distract.
Yeah.
Understand? Yeah. I agree. I think that's one of the things that I find isn't entertaining about people like Quentin Tarantino, where everybody swears a ton. It's like I just don't feel like most people swear that much. Like if one character does or some characters do, that makes sense. But when everybody talks the same way and everybody cusses as much as everyone, it's kind of like I'm sorry, that just takes me out of it because it doesn't seem realistic that everybody talks like that, you know?
Yeah.
But then I come from, like, you know, because you live there for a portion of time from a place where people don't talk that way. So it's really unrealistic to me to have people constantly cussing. But then we moved to Texas, and apparently people cuss all the time around here. Like my kids are listening to people say the F bomb on the bus to junior high and like, middle school. And I'm like, I don't remember anybody talking like that when I was in high school. I was in
Yeah.
college before I heard people actually talk that way. Most of my friends did not talk that way. But then, I come from a different type of place where, I don't know, it's just not common there.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're used to people swearing a lot, it's not going to bother you at all. You're not going to even notice the swear words. What's
Yeah.
funny at the same time, there are some movies where I don't notice the swear words because it's so a part of the character and so part of the story that it doesn't faze me at all. That does sound really weird, but um, the movie My Cousin Vinny, I love this movie, one of my favorite movies of all times. Cusses constantly, but because it makes sense with those two characters in the movie, 'cause they're from New York and that's how they talk,
Right.
doesn't even faze me. And
Yeah.
I hate that word. I hate cuss words, but like some reason it works in that movie. I don't know why.
Yeah. So I've run into that a few times where I'll be like The Sandlot is another one where there's not a lot in there, but like I didn't remember anything. Like that was good, clean fun, like, you know.
Hmm.
And then I was like, I want my kid, like I'll say like the "You're killing me" smalls or something, and I'll say a quote from the movie, or I'll reference the movie or whatever. And my kids are like, okay. And so at one point I'm like, they just need to see it. They just need to see the movie
I
so that
gotcha.
we can
Yeah.
all love it together. And Scott was like, what are you watching? And I'm like, it
Why not?
I'm like, it's a good movie.
Yeah, like
So
it is funny how many things that you watched growing up didn't seem all that bad until you like try to watch it with your kids and you're like, oh yeah, there's a lot more cussing in this than I remembered.
yeah. Yeah. My kids will use like current slang and they'll like use it and then they'll be like, do you know what that means? And if I know what it means already, like if they don't have to explain it to me, if I already know what they're talking about, they don't use it anymore. And I'm like, oh, see, because you were special until mom understood it. And if you were explaining it to me, then I'm the old lady in the room that you're like, that's what this means, mom. So I did notice that he likes, and somebody told me that this was a thing before, I think with Carrie, that he likes to throw in like either sexual deviancy or something to be like, look at this person, clearly you can't trust them, or look at
Mm,
this person, like you should be able to identify with them, like that he throws that in
okay.
different ways in different stories. Someone had said that, I think, about Carrie, um but I've never read Carrie, so I don't know. But and I noticed that there was just a little like you're going along, you're hearing the story, and then there would be just a little bit that you're like, what? Okay.
Okay.
And then the story goes on and you're like, why was
Yeah.
that there? But apparently that's like a, so
You know,
now you
trying
know
to
what
make
to think.
paying
Like,
attention. He's like, did you fall asleep? I'm gonna put this little thing in there. And I'm like, oh, did you notice that?
yeah.
You're awake
So,
now, right? Yeah.
that didn't pull me out so much. That to me, it kind of did feel like he wanted to explore a character a little bit more than their work environment provided or whatever,
Hmm.
which that was not so off-putting to me, even though he tried to make the characters often seem off-putting,
Hmm.
but that actually made it more rich to me. Like that made
Okay.
them more of a rich character.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. What are your thoughts about like the book in general, like as the story?
I liked the story. I actually, so I put down in my notes, I was surprised at how much book was left after the chase.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was reading the story about this dad that is just always has to stay one step ahead, and they got the daughter for a little while, and and all of a sudden they got him and I'm like, oh, and that was only like the first third of the book or something. I'm like,
Like
well, wait,
there's
what?
more. Yeah,
But
that part of you thinks when you start off with them being chased right off the bat, which I think was a really smart way to do it, instead of trying to tell the story linearly, like
mhm,
from, when they were younger, the dad and the mom, and when they first did the experiment and were a part of Lot 6, whatever, and first encountered the shop, instead of starting there, he started the story of like where him and Charlie are running away, and
mhm,
we kept seeing the past and explanations of why they're running away in flashbacks. And I feel like that was very effective because like it started you off in a high action, high impact moment, and it got you asking all these questions, and it made you curious. You're like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on? What's going on? But like it
mhm,
slowly gave you information to explain what's going on and build character and understand these people. So I like that a lot. I think that made it a lot more effective than starting from the beginning and then going on. So yeah, when you start that way though, with like the high impact, they're being chased by these bad guys and we don't know who the bad guys are or why they want them, then like you almost feel like this whole story is gonna be about the chase. And
yeah,
then when all of a sudden they actually get caught, it's like, oh crap, now what? So having watched the movie growing up, I grew up with the Drew Barrymore
mhm,
movie version of it, and I knew the story before reading the book. So I watched the movie first before reading the book. So my experience is a little different. So I was very curious to see how the book would correlate to the movie. And as far as the 80s version, it's pretty darn spot on.
Yeah.
There's a few things that are different, but not a lot. So like it felt pretty true to the book.
Hmm.
It was fun reading the book and going, okay, yeah, that's what's in the movie. That's what's in the movie. And there was something I haven't seen the movie in maybe 20 years. So like I was like, okay, watch the movie and I'm like, oh, I didn't remember that. Or like I remember that differently. And there was a lot of stuff that I remembered, exactly the way it was. But overall, it was fun reading it after having seen the movie and knowing what to expect. So I knew they were going to eventually get caught. I knew that was part of it. But what's interesting is in the book, they were at the cabin in Vermont a lot longer and it had kind of like a nice little like a sigh, like a deep breath of relief, like, we can calm down for a minute. You have a moment of peace and just
Hmm.
be father and daughter and just be people for a little bit. It also made the cabin seem nicer in the book than it was in the 80s movie. And it
Yeah.
just, I don't, it felt like just, I liked that part. Although, like, you're up to that point, you're like, oh, run, 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 run. And then you have the thing at the farm, and you're like, and then they actually get away. And it was kind of nice just to have that moment of calm. I
Hmm.
enjoyed that moment. But then it does kind of give you a sense of, well, wait a second, what's going to happen here? So, how are they going to actually get them? And then when they do get them and they get them in like so easily, it's almost like, I'm expecting another farm situation. Like they're going to blow up some more cars and peoples and stuff. And not that I really want to watch them burn people alive or anything, but like you have expected that to be what happened. And then when they catch them so easily, it's like, okay. If I hadn't already seen the movie before, I would have been kind of like, well, crap, is that the end? Well, there's more book going on. What's going on here?
Yeah. That's kind of what I did. I was like, what else am I going to be reading?
What's going to
But
happen now?
but good for King's abilities that like that I had that moment and then I'm like, all right, I'm in. Let's see. Like
Yeah, let's find out.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that was interesting. And then they spend a good time the rest of the book at the shop, which I really enjoyed the how that was explained in the book, the concept of this secret government agency, but in a very innocuous setting. These
Hmm.
two old Victorian homes, it's very nice, picturesque, pretty place, but a Minot steady one. It's evil going on inside.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like the way that one's explained. And I liked how in the 80s movies they tried to like kind of do that as much as they could. They tried
Hmm.
to recreate that fairly well. I thought
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anything else you want to say about the book?
Well, so I wanted to add, like, just like I know that you saw the movie already, so you kind of had an idea of the characters. But when
Mhm.
you were reading the book, did any of the characters feel different to you?
So yes. So because I had seen the movie first, um the doctor that was in charge of Andy in the movie was completely
Hmm.
different than how he was in the book. And I found him really interesting that that's one of those sexual deviance people you're talking about. Um, and I found that interesting. I can see why it didn't feel necessary to people like to put
Yeah.
it in the movie, but like, and it is quite a bit disturbing what happens to that guy. Um, but I found that interesting, and that was very different. Also, um, my brain just shut off. I forgot his name. I'm sorry, the name of the Indian guy. Uh,
Rainbird.
Rainbird. Thank you. Okay, so I've been watching a show recently where some character was named Rainer, and so my it's like, okay, yeah, Rainbird. He is very different in the book than he was in the 80s movies, and like I didn't even know he was supposed to be an Indian. Like,
Oh,
'cause he's like a white dude in the 80s one. So maybe he is part Indian. I can't tell. Like, let's just say that the actor playing him isn't obviously an Indian man. So, like,
right.
he could be part Indian for all I know. But I didn't get that from his character in the movie. That's what he was. So I feel like And in the book, he's far more interesting because we get to know all the stuff about him before. And you got to know more about his motivations and why he's interested in Charlie. And I felt
Hmm.
like that added a lot more depth to that character. And that doesn't come across in the movie, you know?
Yep.
And so I felt like he was just a lot more interesting character in the book.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think that's probably the one that was the most different for me.
Yeah.
Um, was there anybody that you felt like was
Well,
different?
mostly that one. Also, I felt like the captain,
Mhm.
whatever, that he seemed to have more like there was a more dramatic because the book could take more time. That he
Uh-huh.
was like he was the boss, he was the captain. He had his stuff together. He knew he was getting close to aging out, and so he pulled the right strings and he did the right thing to keep himself in power, and he was like, I will make this successful. And he was capable. And then Andy breaks him over time, breaks him down and turns him into like a bowl of oatmeal. Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I liked that. I liked that change, but also, like you said, Rainbird, like he was a deliciously disgusting character, like super rich, and I loved that he was among the villains, but just like everything about him makes you go, oh, like even his obsession with I almost said Andy,
Charlie.
Charlie. Both of those are like girl or boy names. It got confusing. But anyway, his
Only ever
obsession,
known boys named Andy. I've never met a girl named Andy, but okay.
oh,
What did they say?
well, but um anyway, he like starts to say that he is in love with her. She's my sister, she's my mother, she's my lover, and you're like, she's a 10-year-old girl. Like, you're like, that's gross. But it's this all-consuming obsession that he,
Yeah, like he means in like a psychological way. He's not actually
right,
a little girl, but like he does feel like this deep connection to her.
right.
And like that
And
is
I felt like I was almost excited to like watch an actor just own that character. I wanted to see who would imbibe what the character in the book imbibed. And I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but I don't feel like I got that.
talking about the 80s version. I feel like because I grew up with it, I felt like he was fine. But then
Mhm.
reading the book is like, yeah, okay, there's a lot more to that character than you got from the movie. So I didn't feel like he was horrible, but yeah, he didn't
Right,
get it's like you got just to skim the surface of who that guy was. You didn't get like all the layers of him. And
right.
then we're talking about the remake. So do you want to talk about the remake yet, or do we
Sure,
just
we can go into the remake. Oh, so on the 80s movie, I wanted to say, um, I don't remember, I don't remember if it was my daughter or my sister, but one of them saw the guy. I wrote down his name. Ready? That's the book. Where's the movie? David Keith
yeah,
is
that's the guy that plays Andy.
is Andy. Yeah, it was funny because she was like, ugh, I think it might have been my sister, but like, she's like, that's a weird looking dude, and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't think he's over looking dude. He's a
I
handsome guy.
I'm like, I thought he was a good like it was just funny. But I was like, but that's perfect though. That's perfect that depending on the scene you see, because I think the scene that they saw was like he like had like a really extreme face or whatever. And and they kept doing the thing, like all the weird sound effects where he'd go and they go or
Yeah.
what.
Yeah, so because that was part of what was I found interesting is that I remember growing up with that and it didn't bother me. But then
Yeah,
watching it again after reading the book, I was like, yeah, it is a little cheesy, a little corny 80s. This is how they're
right.
going to manifest, show that he's doing his mind powers with the he has to touch his head. Because
Yeah,
in the book he didn't have to do anything physically to make it happen. Like he
right,
just did it with his mind. So it
right.
wasn't anything physically manifesting that it was going on, which I can understand why in a visual medium, especially in the 80s, you would want to show that somehow,
Yeah.
so people would get that. And then they added the effects, the sound. And
Yeah.
it didn't bother me when I was younger, but yeah, watching it now, I was like, yeah, you know. So
A
we were
little
at,
cringy. But
yeah,
yeah, I really like that guy. I don't know, I don't remember, I don't recall if I have seen him in anything else. Maybe I have. Maybe he was a very popular actor for a while. I don't know.
I know I've seen him
But
on the thing, but I can't think of anything. Right.
yeah, I don't know if I've seen him in anything else, but when I saw him in this, I'm like, ooh, like I did like it. I liked his style. I liked him. What I reminded myself of as I watched that one, I don't like Drew Barrymore. She's probably
Oh,
a lovely person. I
okay.
have I've liked many things that she has done,
You don't
and
like in Firestarter?
I didn't like her in Firestarter. I felt like she was very flat. Like they would be like, okay, now you're gonna be sad. She's like, and they're like, okay, now you're gonna be scared. She's like everything was chewing the scenery.
You wasn't that bad. You're exaggerating it a lot, but okay.
I just didn't like her. And she was like, I am delivering my lines, Daddy. Like, I don't know. I just didn't
Okay.
like her. But but I was like, yeah, watch. It's funny to me to watch this guy who's like, I'm seeing him struggle, and then I will see her do something that I'm like, sweetheart. Ugh.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I just
You're
just didn't
saying
like
you
her.
feel like the dad was more believable than the daughter was?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
guess
she
that's
would
just
take
it.
you out of it.
Anyway,
Okay. Yeah. All right. I don't know if it's because I grew up with Drew Barrymore in that character and I've always liked her as a child actor. I don't like her as much as a grown up. I like her in some things, but I loved her as a child actor. I enjoyed her then. So I don't know if it's just I'm too close to it because I've always seen her in this character, but I love her in this part. I get that I don't know, it's maybe for me it's because of her age, because she's 7 and
yeah,
like she's, little kids don't express things in the same way as adults that aren't as complex emotionally. And so like it doesn't really bother me. But
yeah.
I can see how, that might be an issue for somebody else. But I felt like they had a good chemistry. Drew Barrymore and Keith played her dad. I felt like I bought that they were um father daughter and it worked for me.
Oh, I was gonna say I didn't have anybody else. Like it wasn't like I was like, oh, it should have been actress
Same
X.
too.
Like,
Yeah.
there's nobody else that I thought would have done any better necessarily.
Hmm.
I don't know. I, sometimes you just don't like somebody, and I just
These
didn't like
didn't
her.
quite do it for you.
Yeah.
Right. I loved this in the book. I felt like they built their relationship between the two of them really well. And that it was really strong, and I really enjoyed that
Hmm.
relationship. One thing that was funny is when we were talking about the movie, and I told Johnny that Heather Locklear played her mom, and he's all, "What? No, she didn't." I'm like, "Yeah, she plays her mom." He's like, "What?" And then we watch. She's like, "Oh, she's like there for like a second." I'm like, "Yeah, but it was Heather Locklear. I wasn't wrong." He always doubts me, and I'm almost never wrong when it comes to actors. It's like been one time out of a billion that I've been wrong. One. So, anyways, I don't know why he doubts me. Honestly, I know what I'm talking about. Anyways, but yeah. Um. So then the um, the
The
remake,
remake.
the modern version. What are your thoughts about the Zac
So
Efron remake?
I liked things that I liked. I loved that if the movie is called The Firestarter, the story starts when the Firestarter is born. I liked that. That
Mm,
they did in the book, it worked out much better to like throw you right in the story and you're kind of going, "What? I don't understand." And you're panicking with Andy. Like that worked really well for the book.
uh-huh.
For the movie, it's like, I'm going to tell you a story about this girl. And then it starts that, and you still get the flashbacks of what happened to the parents, but you're telling the Firestarter's story. And so I liked that. I liked the way that it went. Um, and I was kind of I was going, "Oh, that's different, but I can see where that might work. Oh, well, that's kind of awkward, but that might make more sense later." And then everything just like nobody finished the book apparently.
Yes, it's so interesting how different it was. It seemed like they really wanted to make the mom character a bigger character, so they went back and showed that whole part and everything that happened with her instead of sort of getting to what was important, like
Hmm.
Andy and her running away. So I feel like that's part of why they wasted all this time on that section. So we
Hmm.
the mom more important. And I was like,
Yeah.
the mom was important enough. We didn't need to have her be a bigger part. Um, my other thing is I did not like the actress that played the mom. She was forgettable for me and not interesting. And I was like, okay, I really don't like that they melded down all the different shop agents down to just Rainbird.
Yeah.
They kind of killed his whole like story of later on he's supposed to pretend to become her friend in the shop and that whole like double side of his personality. They ruined that. So I was like, okay, so they can't do that now because they made Rainbird the guy that killed her mom and she saw
Right.
him. So how is that gonna work? I was like, what did they do that for?
That's
But
exactly what I thought too.
yeah, I was like, what? And then also, she's not seven. She's not seven in this version. And
She's
I'm
like
sorry,
12.
having her be a little girl made it a more likable and relatable
Hmm.
story. Like you're like, okay, she's just a little girl. She's just still figuring this out. A
Hmm.
12 to like 15-year-old? I'm
Right.
sorry. No, she's mature enough to have more control over her emotions, I would think.
Right.
And she's not cute. She's not a bad looking girl. I'm not saying that. I'm saying she's not adorable. She's not
Right.
a little baby that you're like, oh, I feel so sorry for this poor child. This is how they
Right.
were born. No, she's a teenager.
And I will say for Drew Barrymore, she's endearing. To look at her,
Hmm.
she's endearing. Like you
He was
want
a
to
cute
help that
kid.
little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Where's
yeah, so what was I thinking? Oh, I lost it.
let me see.
It'll come back maybe.
Mm.
Oh, I was gonna say she almost had an air of evil to her. Like
The
there's a
girl in the
point
remake?
the girl in the re Charlie in the remake. So
Yeah.
there's a point in the book when she's exploding everything and she's having her like freak out moment and whatever. And a woman that had worked there, she's like a secretary or something. She's scaling the fence or something and she falls and she breaks her arm. And when
Yeah.
she sees Charlie, she's like, "You're a monster, right?" And Charlie has this moment of like, "What?" And in that moment, reading the book, I was like, screw you, lady, because this little girl was never given a chance. She's a
Right.
little girl, and you guys did this to her.
You
You
didn't
know,
treat her like a person, and this is why this happened.
right. I was so mad at that lady. And then when I was watching the remake like, and watching Drew Barrymore, yeah, for someone to call that girl a monster, you're the
Mhm.
monster, you know, like
You jerk. Yeah.
but then watching the remake, I'm like, this girl kind of is a monster. Like
Hmm.
she kind of had that bubbling up inside her. And so then in the end, when she lets she fries her dad without a second thought. I guess he like mind dominates
Yeah.
her.
So yeah,
But
in the book they talked about how he was gonna push her to not go to Rainburg in the barn.
mhm,
And it was the first time he would ever push Charlie.
right.
And they end up not needing to because, Cap freaked out and because he thought he saw a snake and then,
Right.
all heck broke loose. But in this version, he does push his daughter, which to me I feel like is the ultimate.
Betrayal.
It's a betrayal. It's like he becomes the shop in doing that. So I
Mhm.
like that he didn't end up actually doing that in the book or in the other movie, but then they made him do that in this one, and I hated that.
Well, and the thing is, like he pushes her in this to take I did not like their cap.
Oh, I
Their
hated their Cap. Oh
oh, I
yeah.
hated
Okay,
her.
so their whole rewrite of Cap was like, I'm sorry, I know you're like, well, we gotta put a woman in here somewhere, and we gotta
Right.
have her be in charge, and she's gotta be this and this and this. They gotta check off all these boxes. But I hated her. I didn't feel like she embodied the character at all. Like, don't get me wrong, Martin Sheen was okay in the 80s one, but he wasn't exactly like the perfect Cap or anything.
Right.
He was fine, but I feel like they could have gotten somebody better for it, or
Right.
they could have. had him do more with it in the other movie. But the new version of the Cap didn't make any sense to me. I didn't like her one bit.
Nope.
And I don't know. It was weird. It was weird. I just seemed like a strange choice. And so yeah,
Yeah.
you feel nothing about her dying.
Right. Well, and Andy's death is ultimately worthless too. He was just like, you have to burn us, Charlie. You have to take me out because it'll take her out too. And then for nothing. Like that was a completely worthless death. Like she just like
Yeah.
turns around, could have taken Rainbird out, doesn't. And then ultimately he carries her away and they're
Yeah.
buds now. Like,
What? He killed her mother. That was like
yeah,
just the dumbest ending ever. So
yeah.
first off, I didn't like that they changed the way the shop was, and it was just a dumb building, lost all its aesthetics and all its interesting qualities they had in the book. I'm like, okay. I didn't like that suddenly she had all these powers. Suddenly now she could push on people, and like she couldn't push. She had telekinesis and she had
Pyrokinesis.
pyrokinesis. Okay.
They had hinted that they thought she might have other stuff
But
that
they
lay
didn't know.
dormant, but they
Yeah,
never explore it.
exactly. But like in the book, though, they said that she didn't push. I mean, they also made it clear that she didn't get hurt or she didn't have any pain when she did it,
Hmm.
like her father did. Um,
Hmm.
so I didn't like the suddenly she's doing all this extra stuff in
Yeah.
the remake when she busts in and goes to save him. I didn't like the whole. So to me, it felt like they didn't understand the point of the story. They didn't understand the characters when they made the remake. I didn't feel like there was a connection between the dad and the daughter, really. I felt like the daughter would just, I didn't care. I didn't get to know her on a level where I cared about her survival. Um,
Hmm.
again, they tried to make her act like she was a little kid, but she's not a little kid.
Yeah.
And all this stuff about showing her getting bullied and stuff, I was like, you know what? We don't need to see that.
Yeah.
That added nothing to the story for me. And like, I didn't like the way they changed the farm, the couple on the farm.
I didn't get that either. That is another thing that it felt like it was supposed to go somewhere. Like that's what I was talking about. It felt like this is really awkward and off the original, but maybe it will be like a cool like coming around
And
somehow.
do something.
No,
Yeah.
they just threw it away. Like it was weird.
Yeah, it was weird. It really was. And I don't know. There were a lot of things. And then it being Rainer that came to the farm instead of her destroying the cards and everything. That was one of the coolest scenes in the book. And it was really well done in the other movie. And
Hmm.
then they don't do that. Instead, it's like the dad goes out there and tries to stop him, and it's the local cops that get killed. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, no, I don't want the local cops involved in this. That just, I don't know. I felt like there was a lot of useless changes that didn't add anything, that didn't improve anything. And I felt like they just
Agreed.
didn't get the characters. They didn't get the story.
Yeah, I would
You
agree with
know?
that.
Like, yeah. And I felt like her having her run off at the farm and going by herself and the dad getting caught was a whole thing so they could have the women's empowerment and the girl's gonna be the girl boss and she's gonna save the day.
Right.
And it's like, I'm sorry, no. That's who her character's supposed to be. Her character is still figuring stuff out. And she's supposed to be a 7-year-old little girl. So that's the other thing. Having a 6 going on 7-year-old daughter, felt in reading the book, I felt like I could relate to this character because I could see my daughter in that character. And that made it a lot more believable and it made it more real for me. And like it changes the whole dynamic of the story when you change it from a kid, a little kid, to a teenager. It just
Yeah.
does. And especially since they didn't really give her any endearing qualities or make her likable at all as a teenager. The way she got along with her father, I didn't like the mother. I didn't like Rainbird, even though he was an actual Indian this time. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm Indian.
Well, and they didn't really play into that in the way the book did too.
Yeah,
Like sometimes I kind of wondered if Stephen King were writing this today, would he maybe be a little bit more considerate in the way that he wrote a Native American? However, I like what he did, and so I'm not upset that he wrote
Yeah.
it the way he wrote
I
it.
don't feel like there was
But
a okay, so that's the thing. Okay, let's just slightly off topic here. So everybody makes a fuss about how old stuff was written and like it's stereotypical and it's offensive and it's racist because, they portray different people of different minorities of different nationalities a certain way. And I'm like,
mhm,
okay, thing is though, stereotypes exist for reasons because it's true to a certain extent. Enough people are like that it becomes a stereotype. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a stereotype.
yeah,
And you can't tell me that people don't do that with white people. They do it all the time. And so, and then everybody's like, oh, well, that was so inappropriate and blah, blah, blah. I don't feel like he wrote anything offensive when he wrote his character at all. I didn't feel like he was making a statement about all Native Americans. I feel like this was just this character, this
right,
guy, this particular
right.
person. And that was part of who he was. I don't feel like there was anything offensive in that portrayal at
See,
all.
and I liked it. I liked, like I said, I was deeply disturbed and very satisfied with the evilness of Rainbird. Like I liked this character. And one of the so of course, because I always like look for the little extras and either
Or
making of or
good job.
yeah. But and so a comment that people, not a lot of people, but there have been a fair amount of comments about Rainbird being very stereotypical or doing th like saying things like, well, the heap big Indian is gonna get you in a heap big trouble if you don't, or whatever, like saying silly things like that, but they're like, that's belittling it, whatever. And the thing is that he was doing that on purpose. It was Rainbird being sarcastic. You know what I mean? Every time Rainbird said something weird like that, it wasn't actually Stephen King like thinking that all Indians were like
No, it was
Tiger
sarcastic.
Lily in Peter Pan. It was Rainbird kind of teasing the white guys or whatever to be like, "Oh, he big Indians say you're a jerk." Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that was that was why it was written the way it was written. And
yeah,
so
and
I liked it, but I have seen that criticism.
mhm.
But no, in the remake, I felt like, yes, sure, physically he does look like Native American. Great. But there was nothing that was like speaking to the spirit of the earth type of stuff that Rainbird was like. He was obsessed. He wanted to look you in the eye and see that moment of
Passing.
whatever in his twisted craziness.
Yeah, like in this whole thing about like a little kid. If it was a little kid, maybe he'd be able to see it because they're pure. He'd be able to see
Right,
the moment when they cross over. And I got that. And I'm like, that's disturbing, but like that makes sense. Like in his
right.
mindset, that makes sense to him why he would think that way. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
And it was just he was just, I don't know, two-dimensional. I don't know. I felt like Andy didn't like Charlie. Andy was there for his wife and didn't like Charlie. And
In the
then
remake.
in the remake, yeah.
Yeah. I'm
And then
again,
suddenly
I was
it's,
kind of excited about the idea of Zac Efron. So I was like, yeah, he kind of makes sense as a modern day version
yeah.
of the other actor. So I was looking forward to that because I know Zac Efron could be a really good actor.
Mhm.
But and I wouldn't say that he was bad in it, but I feel like the way they wrote the story was bad, and
Yes.
like how they wrote him and his daughter's interaction was bad. Like
Yep.
I feel like he did the best he could with what he had,
Yep.
you
I
know.
agree.
But it wasn't a great. It wasn't the same story. Like I feel like if he'd had a 7-year-old little girl and been given the same story as the actual book, it could have been a lot more interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we were really disappointed. Like, because Johnny wanted to see the remake and be like, oh, I want to see how they do this in a modern version, in a
Right.
modern movie, without all the cheesy 80s stuff. And then instead we got that thing, which was
Yeah.
like,
Well, and so there's a TV series, that from what I understand, it's supposed to be uh what happens after the remake, like
okay,
Charlie post the 20 teens version of this,
okay.
which guess is why she needed to go off with Rainbird. But
Oh,
I don't know. I didn't see the series. Don't quote me. I'm not
okay.
completely sure. I saw that the series was there, and I did not take the opportunity to watch it because I knew I wouldn't be able to finish it in time.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't interested. I was like the basic description is like Charlie and John Rainbird, and I'm like,
No.
what? You know. So yeah,
It's
but
not supposed to be Charlie and John. It's not how it's supposed
yeah,
to be. Yeah.
yeah,
What's
it
funny is
just
when I was reading the book, I kept thinking, you know what, I would kind of like to see a sequel to the actual book, but like as Charlie is a grown up and then she
Mhm.
has a child, and
Yeah,
like, is her child going to have these things? And like, how is she going to deal with it
yeah,
after seeing what her parents went through? And like, I love that idea. I was like, I would love to have seen, I would love if like Stephen King wrote a sequel to Charlie.
yeah,
It's like, as a grown up and like what she goes through later on.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't
Oh,
want to see that version of Charlie.
yeah, no, I don't either. I don't want to see moralless Charlie.
No,
That was not pleasant.
she was heartless. Like
Yeah.
little girl Charlie, she felt bad when she hurt people. And like
Mhm.
she cried and she was struggling to deal with it. I feel like this Charlie, she just didn't care.
Yeah.
Didn't care. Like and like this whole I don't know. I just feel like they
And
just
like,
missed the mark on so many things with the remake
yeah,
and it's so
yeah.
disappointing.
And I wanted to like the part when so she sees the cat and the cat scratches her and when the dad comes out. So in the book, he is talking about when he was hunting, he had that memory. And the first time he went hunting and he shot a deer or something
Yeah,
and it didn't kill him, or it was a bow and arrow maybe. I don't remember. But
yeah.
anyway, and they were like, now it's just suffering, sweetheart, and not
Yeah.
sweetheart, but now it's suffering. You need to put it out of its misery, and you're responsible for that. And that at that point, um, what was the guy's name? It was like the grandpa, but his name was something weird.
Uh-huh.
But Granther, he was like, he will never just be like, yeah, let's go have fun with guns again, because now he gets the reality of death.
Yeah.
And so when they had the cat and the cat was suffering, and he's like, baby, you're just torturing it now. And she kind of has like that moment where she's like, cool. And he's like, no, put it out of its misery. And so
Yeah.
she does, because it feels good. It feels good to set things on fire. And I'm like, that was exactly the opposite of what she was supposed to learn from that. She was supposed to learn this is awful. I don't want to do that. It hurts my soul to do that.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
she didn't learn that at all. But also, there was something I don't she just the Charlie in the book just had like W Riz, speaking of the lingo of today.
Uh-huh.
Um but she had this ability, like when we say like Rainbird seemed to almost he said several times that he was in love with her, and it wasn't even necessarily like a romantic love. He was just completely overwhelmed with this like obsession of her, right? And um the older couple, like they kept wanting to help her even though they didn't understand, and they were scared, and they're like, oh, we're scared. But then when she would be in their presence, they were like, yes, anything for you. And at the very end, she walks into
The
the
newspaper or the
news.
magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy, like the comment is made, like not even the comment made out loud, but like the guy looks at her and he's like, "Oh wow, I could fall in love with this girl." And you're like, "What in the world?" But there's something to that like maybe she didn't have the push, the mental domination, but
Uh-huh.
she just had this like, I need you to like me enough to want to help me kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, like say she
this,
had some kind of like charm or charisma that like
right,
just emanates so like she's able to get people to trust her or
right.
like her to care about her. You
And I
know,
felt like it was,
not even aware she's doing.
yeah, yeah. She's not even like pushing them necessarily. She's just like, ah. I need him to open up to me. I need him to give me a chance. And there it is. The chance is
Yeah.
given. But I felt like it was the opposite in the remake. Like the Barrymore character, like I said, I didn't like Barrymore, but also I could see where that girl could go to a newsroom and charisma herself into getting a story.
Yeah.
I couldn't see that with the girl in the remake. She was the
Yeah.
opposite. She like walked into a room and everyone like immediately was like, "Ooh, I hate
Ugh.
whatever that vibe was." Like I
Like
was
some
like,
people just walked in. Sheesh.
"Yeah, it was unfortunate."
Yeah, I think they tried to make you want to sympathize with her and care about her in the remake with that whole bathroom scene when she was in the school and
Oh,
the teacher, and with the whole her being picked on thing. I think that was them trying to make her sympathetic, and I think it just failed miserably.
yeah.
They hated the cat scene because you know how I am about cats. I
Mhm.
am like 100% a cat person, and I
Yeah.
can't stand the idea of cats being hurt. So that
Yeah.
was
Oh,
watch. I have, though, myself been scratched by a feral cat and actually punctured and popped my lip. And I had to get stitches. So I actually have like an X in my bottom lip.
oh,
So I have had bad experiences with stray cats before. It was because I got in the way. He was messing with my cat. So I was defending my cat.
oh
But,
yeah.
you know, that's what I get. But
Mhm.
of course, I would have done it anyways. But I still don't like the idea of seeing a cat hurt, even like a mean stray cat. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I get what they were trying to do, but they failed so miserably. I wish they'd just taken that out.
Yeah. Well, see, and
Make
that
the
was
same
the
premise.
because I thought that I was gonna see like the hunting scene, and so I thought that she was gonna be like broken that she did this to this poor animal. Like that's what I thought I was witnessing. And then when I saw her go the opposite direction, I was like, well, now
Yeah.
it's just gross. Like I'm not okay with that. Like now it's just like the old lady on the uh what was that, life support or whatever. Like
Hmm.
now it's just making me uncomfortable for no reason.
Yeah.
So
That would just that whole thing was weird. I didn't like how they changed their characters. There was nothing likable
no.
about this movie. Honestly, I just we were very disappointed. And my son that watched it with it was really disappointed. He's like, "What the heck, dude?" And then
Yeah.
we're talking about it. And anyways, needless to say, I don't know that some things should have remakes.
Yeah.
And I think the problem sometimes with remakes is when they like, oh, we got to change everything. And that's what it felt like they did with this one. And
Yep.
instead of trying to make a modern version of the book for nowadays, instead of modernizing it or just doing a new version of the same movie,
Uh-huh.
they did something completely different.
Yeah.
And I don't know, personally, again, I'm big into respecting the source material as a writer and as an artist. I'm super into that. I personally would be offended if I was Stephen King and I saw that remake. I'd be like, what the flip are you doing?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah.
It's a great story. It's a good book. And I really think people should read it. It's really good. And I think there's a lot of interesting things about it. And it's very intriguing. And the whole government agency thing is interesting. The whole
Yeah.
part in the compound in the shop, it's extremely interesting. It's very atmospheric and it's just so cool. And then they didn't even use it.
I know. And I felt like I liked that it progressed. It wasn't slow. Sometimes when I'm reading even an author or a book that I love, I'll be like, "Oh, but there is the part where whatever, he's in prison and it's really slow or whatever."
Mhm.
It wasn't slow to me. It was always like, okay, we're still here. What do I do next? You get this little piece of information. You've got something to think about, but they don't give you time to think about it because now there's a storm. And like
Yeah.
there's,
Uh-huh.
it was
Even though
constantly
they
moving.
were prisoners, the Department of Prisoners was not boring. There was
Right.
stuff happening. There was stuff going on. And so that was interesting. And,
Yeah.
I think that just shows what a really good writer Stephen King is, that he can write
Yeah.
all these different types of stories and do these different things and make it interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I really liked, I'm glad that we did it. So it's funny
Mhm.
that we keep talking so negatively about the remake because sorry, but most of what I have to say about the remake is not positive.
It's
But
not.
so just so that everybody knows, Ruth and I just did a an episode of Nostalgia Cast with Johnny and Darren, and we were doing Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
And I had said in there that because I know that in many, maybe not all, but in many of their especially their earlier episodes, they would say, so was this worth the remake or is it worth remembering or both, you know?
Mhm.
And so I asked myself that question of Close Encounters and I was like, here's the thing. I do love this and I see where modern acting, modern technology, uh, modern ideas could make this story that much better. However, I don't trust anybody to do, I cannot think of someone that I trust enough to do it. I don't even know if some of the same people that worked on it before, if they would want to try to do because I feel like everything now, like you said, like suddenly Cap is a black woman and she's like so powerful, except she's
And she's got
not
like no
powerful.
likability, and she's like just awful person.
She's
And
crazy and inept. And
yeah,
Charlie is you know, girl power as well, except that she's just also crazy and not likable. And you know what I mean? Like all of the changes they made were bad changes. And
yeah,
so I kind of feel like maybe what it was I had literally so I watched Close Encounters like super the I think the day that we were like, yep, let's do that one. I was like, sweet, here we go. But we had recorded that episode like a day or two after I had watched the remake of Firestarter and I was like, remakes suck. Like
it's yeah. Well, sometimes they're great, but a lot of times they don't capture the same spirit. I don't know. I don't know that we should remake things from the
yeah,
80s, or
yeah,
we have to keep remaking things over and over again unless you have something you're going to either pay it the respect that it's due, or
yeah,
you're going to do something new and interesting with it that isn't going to ruin it or
right.
completely contradict what it was supposed to be, then I don't see the point. We don't need
Yeah,
to keep remaking stuff all the time. I mean,
I
sometimes
agree.
remakes are good. Like sometimes they do reiterations. Like the Ninja Turtles have had many reboots, and some of them have been good, and some of them have been absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
My Little Pony has had many reboots. Some are good, some are awful. Like, how many times do we need to keep rebooting things before we go, you know what? We'll just leave it alone.
yeah. Well, and some stories are classic. Like you think of Robin Hood and how many countless stories. And I like a lot of them. And it's okay if there's some that I don't like because there's plenty more that I do, right?
Yeah.
And then something like Firestarter, it's a newer thing. It's not a classic tale type of a thing, but you can see you can see where it could become a classic. It could be the thing that gets remakes or gets spin-offs or gets whatever,
Hmm.
but you don't have to actually destroy all that it is. Literally everything that Stephen King was trying to tell you in his book is decimated in the remake.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. It was purposeless.
Yeah, there's no point. They didn't have any good reason for what they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have in agreement
Yes.
that although you're not a fan of Drew Barrymore, the 80s movie is better
Yes.
and the book is great. Definitely read the book. Book is awesome. Um, one of the things that cracked me up though when I was watching the 80s movie this time that I completely forgotten were the fireballs being shot out of her. I'm like, she didn't have fireballs shooting out of her in the book, but
Yeah.
I remember it being that funny, and I was like, oh, 80s movies. I
Yeah.
love you.
Well, and
You're so weird.
I think that's another nod to kind of the hokiness of the 80s, like
Mhm.
with the weird like when you go into the what the lab or whatever and you have like the wall of like machines that do nothing and you hear a little bit of the beep boop boop bop, you know, and I'm like okay, so we just stepped into like the Wonka lab, like you know what I mean? Like a little bit of that hokiness that you can forgive because it was made in the era where that was cool. Like, you
That's
know.
fine. Yeah.
And I was hoping that the remake was like t taking itself a little more seriously because usually I like whimsy.
Hmm.
Firestarter does not have whimsy in its main story. There might be a few little points that Andy is desperately trying to give Charlie some whimsy to hold on to, some
Hmm.
innocence left, but there is no whimsy in the story of Firestarter, and it doesn't really belong. And the hokiness and like laughing at when he like makes the face, he's like, and
Yeah.
you start to pull out a little bit. Not for me, it wasn't like this is ridiculous. Like I still watched it. I would probably watch it again.
Yeah.
But I was hoping that the remake was that taken a little more seriously.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
I,
think
I
that's
didn't get
what
that
we were
way.
hoping for too. And sadly, that's not what we got.
Yeah.
So, anyways, so what are we doing next time?
Oh, I have it. Let me grab it because I actually have it so I can tell you the author. Give me a second.
Okay, hold on. We're doing something else before that, though.
Oh, we are doing something else before that. I'm a genius.
You're
So,
fine.
so
Okay.
we have coming up pretty soon, an interview with our first author of the season,
Yay!
um, Adrienne Monson. She's done several. I'm not sure if we're talking about a specific book or if we're kind of going over her body of work.
We might be, but I think we might be talking about her most recent
Okay.
release, Broken Habit. So
I
maybe
have I have not read that one. I usually try to read up
I
on.
read some of it when I was in the critiquing group. So I've seen versions of it, but I haven't read it as a finished product yet. So
Gotcha. Ooh, cool. All
yeah,
right. So she was my friend in junior high. We were in drama together, and um, I I have always been really good at being like this person. I'll record something. I'll go stand up on stage. Oh, what's that? The speaker is late. I'll go out there and whatever. I've always been that person. But then like on this level, like I don't know what to do, and I struggle to look people in the eye, and it's weird. I'm an introverted extrovert, I guess. I don't know what, but she like in a time that I was not really making friends. Um, I don't remember if you and I had started deciding we didn't hate each other yet, or
yeah, we had started becoming friends at that
yeah, and
point.
I was like, I might have this friend, I might have that friend. And then I would go to drama and I would be like, look at me, I'll play any part, happy to be here. And then no one was like doing group things with me because they all had friends in the group in the class and I didn't. And Adrian was one of them that was like, we can always take another person, and so I was like, yay. And so I don't want to say that I clung to her, but I might have.
That's one of her cool qualities that she can make friends with anybody, and I've always
Mhm.
admired that because I really can't.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it,
Yeah.
but
And then I moved away the summer between high school and junior high,
mhm.
which ultimately it was great. I live here now. Like I do love Arizona, but that was a rough time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But
But
yeah, thank goodness we made friends when we did because around that same time I stopped hanging out with the girls that I'd been friends with from elementary because
mhm,
one of them was evil, and I decided I just didn't need that crap anymore. So and then you and I became friends, and then what's funny is kitty corner to where the drama room was my art class,
mhm,
and like I would come and like I would go to the bathroom and like I would come visit you when I was in art class. I'd come visit you in the drama class, and that's when I met Adrian through you and like all the drama kids. And then I sort of became friends with them too through
mhm.
you. And then when you moved away, it was like, okay, they kind of became my friends because that was the other people that I knew. So I kind of just came into that group. So it worked out really well because I needed a new friend group. And here you go. You sort of introduced me to my new people. And then Adrian and I didn't become really good friends until like junior year in high school. And then we started hanging out together more and we're like, oh my gosh, you're awesome. And then we became really, really good friends. And then she became one of my favorite people. So yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. And now we get to talk to her.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about her books and her writing journey. So that's gonna be exciting. Um, but yeah, so that's what we're gonna do next time.
So, let's see if I can get it to come in. Here we go. The History of Love. That might be backwards. I can't tell. The History of Love by Nicole Krauss.
Oh, okay.
So this is another one that was recommended to me, and then I mentioned it to my mom, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, we just did that for a book club." And I was like, "Oh, okay, was it good?" And she's like, "I loved it. I bought the book." So this is her copy of the book,
Okay.
and she was just, oh, stay in focus. You, oh, doesn't want to stay in focus. Anyway, she was just so excited. She's like, "You will love it. It's supposedly it's hilarious."
Okay.
So that's what the person that recommended it, they said it was so funny, they kept laughing. And then when I mentioned it to my mom, she was like, "Oh yes, I love it." So
Okay. I
if we don't like it,
will blame your
never
mom.
trust them again.
Okay. Okay. I've never heard of it, and I've never seen the movie of it. So
Yeah, I looked it up. There's a couple of big names on there. Of course, I don't remember right now who it is, but there's
yeah.
a couple big names on there,
Okay.
but
All
I
right.
know nothing about it. So
I have no idea what we're getting into here, so this will be interesting. Okay. Yeah. So
you're
the
welcome.
History of Love by who again?
Nicole Krauss.
Nicole Krauss. Anyways, okay,
Um,
awesome. That sounds great. Um, so that's all for today for Firestarter and Stephen King and 80s and remakes that suck. And we will see you guys next time when we have author Adrienne Monson come on and talk about her books. But for Paperback Fix, I'm Ruth Craddock,
I'm Rae Davidson.
and we'll see you guys next time.